the story of the Ramayana, we find that there is a great king, Dasarat, and he wants to have a son. So he makes a sacrifice. And the gods of nature, they're going to complain to their chief god about the decline of Dharma, and they're going to be complaining about the evils of Ravana. And so you'll notice that at the very beginning of this, we get once again the story of the three brothers that I told you earlier, right? So you have Ravana, who's the Rakshasa, he's the evil demon, Kumbhakarna, the giant, and Vibhishan, who ultimately goes on to become our conscience. So you remember that these three brothers sat on top of a mountain for 10,000 years, contemplating eternity, thinking about the greatness of God. Because of their self-discipline, Rama is going to offer each of them a boon. And so we saw that Ravana wanted to gain control, wanted to take over the land, wanted great power. And so he thought of himself as being strong and powerful already, this 10-headed demon. But he says, protect me from the gods and from the demons. He doesn't think that humans could harm him, doesn't think that animals could harm him, but he doesn't want to be stopped in his endeavor. So he says, protect me from humans and from animals. Protect me from gods and from demons. And so that's the gift that was given to him. Kumbhakarna, of course, we saw he got tricked into asking to be allowed to sleep for 6 months for every day that he remained awake, protecting the world from clumsiness, from oafishness, and so on. And then, of course, the good demon, Vibhishan, he's the one who says, don't let me ever forget Dharma, to keep Dharma alive. And because of that request, he was also given immortality so that he could live forever and keep Dharma alive, at least within his own mind, within his own conscience. And then through that process, he becomes our conscience so that we never completely forget Dharma. As we learned, of course, it's important for us to hold on to Dharma because that's the part of our ego structure that's going to help us to get back to Godhead, that's going to help us to reclaim our original position. Ravana, of course, is going to be one of the figures. He's the major villain within the story. And he uses that boon that he was given to become the king of the demons. He rules in a place called Lanka, and he begins the destruction of Dharma. He does all kinds of evil and corrupt things. He steals away wives from others and daughters and makes them his own. He engages in war with anyone he can find. He's destroying all the natural forces of the world around us. He's doing all these terrible things. And so his power is growing. It's getting worse and worse. So you can see kind of a similar theme to what we had with the Mahabharata, right? You had the Kurus who usurped the power from the Pandavas, and what did they do? They used their boons and their abilities to grow their strength so that they could take over, they could become more dominant, that they could bring corruption and evil into this world. And so Krishna had to come into the world to convince Arjuna to bring these individuals down, to put an end to it. In the case of the Ramayana, God's going to come into the world in the form of Rama this time, and it's going to be his duty, along with Hanuman and Lakshman and these others, to put an end to the evil, to the corruption of Ravana. Now, after all of this destruction is taking place, the gods of nature are going to ask this basic question: what is it that we can do about this? This Ravana has become so bad, he's become so corrupt, something has to be done. What can we do? And so God responds, he says, I will go down. And so God goes down into the world, dividing himself up into 4 individual figures, the 4 sons of the king, as well as Sita, the daughter of another king. And so really he's divided himself into 5 separate divisions, 4 sons of one family, a daughter of the other. And Ravana, of course, took no protection against human beings or animals. And so when God comes into the world, he's going to come as Rama, as Lakshman, as Sita. He's going to come in human form. And as a human, coupled with the help of Hanuman, the monkeys, the bears that are going to be led by him, they will ultimately end up to Ravana. Now, from the time that all of this is taking place and Dasharatha had asked for the child, 16 years are going to pass. The sons that he is given, they're taught to act like princes. They learn to be good rulers. They also learn to be good people in general. They hear about the divine message. They understand the concept of God as the one, the ineffable being. But these individuals who came here, they came for a purpose. They're not just there to come down and say, oh, look, we get to be rulers and governors. We get to live here in blissful luxury. They didn't do that. Like all gods, they've come into this world for a very specific purpose, and that is to take on all of the suffering of this world. Now, a figure called Viswamitra, who is the individual that's speaking here in front of the king, he's a holy man, and he tells the king that his son Ram has to be given as a sacrifice in order to defeat the demons. He has to be given as a sacrifice. Now, this is somewhat confusing because when we hear this in a context, we might think back to the story of Abraham and Isaac, for example. And God told Abraham to take Isaac to the mountaintop and offer him there as a sacrifice, that there was reason why that was necessary. And, of course, as we saw, Abraham complies. Now, we, of course, realize that in the long run that story ends well because there's a voice that cries out, there's a ram caught in the thicket, and Isaac is not sacrificed. He was offered, but he wasn't actually taken. Well, we see a similar thing actually here. Now, it's not God specifically who is directly saying you must give this individual a sacrifice. It's Viswamitra, it's a holy man. He's not actually being given in sacrifice in the sense of being offered up on a sacrificial altar, but rather he's being said, you have to come with me. You have to leave your palace, you have to come with me, you have to learn the things that I have to teach you. Now, of course, the king is going to be very agitated by this. He's waited something like 60,000 years, we're told, to have a child. That puts Abraham in perspective, right? I mean, he was 99 when Isaac was born. But, we're told Dasharatha had waited something like 60,000 years before he had a child. And when Rama came into the world, he was perfect. He was ideal in every way. He was that perfect being that was described originally by Valmiki. How can a 16-year-old, somebody who has never known any type of hardship, be made to go out into the world and face these terrible demons? How can he alone bring down this horrible evil? Well, the king is trying to back out of it. He made a promise. He made a pledge when These children were brought into existence. And so now that the holy man has come, he wants to kind of go back on his word. But the king knows he can't do it. He has to add to Dharma. He understands there's a duty and a purpose behind everything. And so he's going to add to it, not take from it. And so the king is going to give Rama over to Viswamitra so that he can receive the instruction that he needs and fulfill the task that he was born into this world to do. He has been brought here specifically to restore hope and faith to all of mankind and to help lead everyone back to the divine. So Rama and his brother Lakshman are going to be given over to this sage, and they put on their weapons and they travel on. Now the sage is there to act as the one that's going to lead Ram to his destiny. This means a couple of things. First, it means he's going to be taken to his destiny, which is to come to understand his true nature, to realize that he is divine, that he is here to bring order back into the world and to defeat the evil that Ravana possesses. But he's also there for another reason, and that is to lead him to Sita. Sita, again, is sort of a female incarnation of the divine, and so Sita and Ram come together. You have a joining together of the masculine and the feminine aspect of the divine. That's a concept that we find within a lot of ancient traditions, and one that is sort of fallen from favor in the more modern world, more modern world of the last 2,000 years anyway. But a lot of the early traditions recognize that if God is the whole, then that means that every duality is contained within it. And that would imply that there would be both a masculine and a feminine aspect of the divine. You know, you go back and you look at the origins of Judaism and Christianity, for example, and we think of these as being monotheistic views. There is one God and only one God. But yet, as late as 1000 BC, about the time of David and Solomon, that was when that notion of monotheism really took hold. In the earlier stages, there were a multiplicity of deities, and there was the male and female aspect. There was a female figure called Asherah, and Asherah was the female counterpart to Yahweh. And so you saw that there was both the male and the female aspect, but, like I said, by about 1000 BC, Asherah had been demonized and corrupted into this demonic figure, a screech owl, they called her. And Yahweh took off as the one deity, as the one true God. That's cultural, essentially. That's trying to impose a male-dominated order and to eliminate and diminish the role of the female aspect. Well, that happens a lot in the Western world. But the Eastern world tends to maintain that original duality. It tends to recognize there's this aspect that is both the male and the female counterparts or aspects of the divine. And it does, if you're thinking about that deity as being the whole, it does make sense that it would contain that within. So that's why it becomes very important that he's able to take Rama not just to his grand destiny of defeating evil and so forth, but also his destiny of reuniting or joining the male and female aspect back together to provide that sense of a whole. Let's take a look at page 30. The sage is preparing the brothers, and they're getting them ready for their duty. And then he's going to make a prophecy. And this prophecy is given to us here at the top of page 30. Embracing him, the rishi said, "Rama of Ayodhya, your name shall be immortal. Men will remember you as long as the world exists. From yuga to yuga, your fame will be sung. The yuga you have helped me complete in the teeth of evil will bless the earth long ages after you and I are no more in it. Prince of Light, today you have won a greater battle than you yourself know." Viswamitra saw into the past and the future, as if they were plain before his eyes. The Brahmarishi thought, "Not even Ravana of Lanka, who is evil incarnate, shall prevail against you, Ram. But I fear your way is long and fraught with sorrow before you rid the earth of that Rakshasa." Okay. Rakshasa, again, is just another name for a demon. But the prophecy is being made that Rama is here for that purpose. He is going to be able to defeat Ravana, but it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of energy. If you've read into the story, you know that he has to go into exile for 14 years. You know that it's during that time and near the end of that time that he ultimately is able to defeat him. So there's a long period of time there before this happens, and there's a lot of danger, there's a lot of difficulty, right? That's the adventure aspect of the story, keeping the reader going. But he's prophesying here that he will be victorious. So it's always nice, you know, if you go into a battle knowing who's going to win. So the sage gave them all of this knowledge, gave them this prophecy, and when their education was complete, he gave them several chants that they could use to bring forth divine weapons to help them. They need to be able to fight the evil that exists out there. And so Viswamitra is going to take Rama and Lakshman to a place called Mithila. And Mithila is the home of King Janaka, which is where Sita is going to be from. Sita is King Janaka's daughter. Now, the intention of the sage, of course, he knows about the male and female aspect, so he wants to get Sita and Rama brought together as man and wife.